All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to another DoneJS contributors meeting. I am Justin Meyer, and with me is Prashant. Hey, Prashant.
Hi.
Calling in from India, and Matthew, calling in from Louisville.
Great state, Kentucky, the Commonwealth, actually.
It's a Commonwealth? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's us in Pennsylvania.
Really? What's the difference?
Not the slightest clue.
It is Louisville, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean like Louisville.
Oh, well, who knows? Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, we can debate this all day.
Okay, so my status, this was a short week, and a bunch of people are out on vacation this week. My status is I finally got 238 ready so David can push it. Hopefully, if he's out there somewhere in Ether, he'll make a 238. I've started working on the. I'm just looking at the thing. I'm looking at my stats from last week. I started working on the 2.3 release article that I'll go over at the end of this. I haven't made much progress on the evangelism roadmap. It was really just a short week. It was yesterday and the day before where I got work done. Did either of you guys add anything to the evangelism stuff in Trello? I know some people have talked about ideas, but
I haven't.
I haven't seen any. So let me get that open. So let me just remind people where we are with that. So everybody should have access to this on the core team. I think we'll talk more about this next week, especially because there'll be people from Bitovi being added to get work done. I think the big things, but just because of skill set, who's going to be coming free, there'll be a guy named James. James, I think, will be working on his room planner as an example app because he built this, and he'll be getting that ready to be open sourced and an example where people can look and learn from a DoneJS application. So that's
He's doing server-side rendering and everything with that, right?
I don't know. I don't think server-side rendering is working, but we can get that to work. He's using jQuery to do SVG manipulation. That's kind of the plan is, it'd be very cool if SVG works server-side rendered as the demo. And then Chris is going to be working on CanDerive. And Prashant, I'm not sure if you know what CanDerive is, but it's pretty cool. It allows faster updates of lists because it uses red-black trees.
Okay.
So when you change a list, like let's say you have a filtered list from a source list, if you change the source list, say in adding an item, the filtered list will be updated faster than linear time, which is actually pretty cool. So he'll be working on that, and then there's two more people coming free, Jan and Mark. I'm probably going to have them working on API docs and the guide. One of them will work on one, the other one will work on the other.
Who is it? Mark and who else?
Jan.
Okay.
So we'll see. So that's it for me. Update, fix.
So are you working on the article yet?
Yeah, that's what I've started. So
2.3.
we can talk about that at the end. You guys want to give your status?
Sure. Prashant, you want to go?
Sure. So, not much from my side. I basically continued working on this Firefox debugging functions ticket, and I made the changes which we discussed last week, and I basically submitted a new pull request that has been merged now. Yeah, thanks. Also, I wanted to have a meeting with Justin to understand the 3.0 features. We couldn't have this meeting yesterday. I basically want to have this meeting so that I at least get an understanding of things that we will be starting on, and at least identify something that I could work on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you send me okay, we canceled the meeting invite, but we didn't create another one for tomorrow. Just create one for tomorrow, and we'll definitely meet up.
I'm afraid that tomorrow is going to be 31st, so I may not be available tomorrow.
Oh, that's fine. Just then we could meet next week, Monday, if that works for you.
Sure, we can do that.
So just schedule a meeting.
Sure.
Cool. Actually, I can give Mohammed's status or sheriff. Actually, he told me that his name. His name is Mohammed, but his second name is Sheriff, and it's pronounced with like instead of like a sheriff, like the cowboy hat sheriff with the badge. It's more with a C sound in the beginning, but it still kind of comes off as sheriff. It's like serif. Sheriff. That's he said what everybody calls him. Okay. So he scheduled a meeting with me and worked on Tuesday, and we got something awesome done in like an hour and a half, which I want to share right now. So let me show it. We got can fine working, like a prototype. So what this is a kind of a version of can define that you can add to a prototype of an object, and as long as you're explicitly declaring these properties in here, you can, I guess I should have showed the example better because the test is actually shows it working. It's observable. You can listen to when like first or last is set. You can get you can listen to first, and also you can get these kind of computed properties like full name.
What does it return?
What does what return?
Define.
It doesn't. It just returns the person prototype.
So do I have to use constructor prototypes? Can I pass a regular object or something?
You could. I don't know. Think it would work. It might work actually.
I think it should work. I mean, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, maybe.
Super useful. Work.
I think it's useful for sure to like if you want to have kind of dynamic objects or something. But our goal is to just get a rough equivalent of can map working. Mm-hmm. So let me show you how it works. It's pretty cool. So, hey, Prashant, if you don't mind muting yourself, just because it's thrashing the video.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Matthew, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let me try to explain how it works. So this is the object prototype that's passed in, and right now I'm just trying to make it as small and as easy to get working as possible. What it does is essentially copies all of can maps methods onto that prototype. Right? This is less than ideal. Also, I'd probably like to do this so that all of those properties are, like, at least even right away, all of those properties are non-enumerable, so you don't like see them if you're looping through the object. And then really the big trick is goes through, where is it? Here's the real crux of it. It goes through all of the defines, so all of the the properties that are trying to be defined, and all it does is on the object prototype adds a getter setter so that when, like, in the test example here, if someone's reading first or last or setting first or last, it's just going to go through can maps underscore get or underscore set methods. And that's mostly it. Now, this other stuff in here is because, and this is kind of a tricky, weird part. With can map, we know when it's initialized because we have control over the constructor. And can map, if we look at can map,
we know when it's initialized.
yeah, so if you look at can map, there's all this initialization code in its setup method.
Yeah.
Right? Like creating the little store for data, adding a CID, setting up this computed properties object, this computed attrs. This part, which I'm not even sure what to do with, so can map has this ability, which actually we might not need to do anything with, but it has this ability to only create, like, given the same object, it only creates the same map for that object once. It has a whole bunch of initialization code. We don't have any of that because we don't control the constructor function. So what can define, what we have to do is say, well, there's a computed attrs property, right? And what we'll do is say, okay, if someone tries to read it and it hasn't been created, well, we'll create it and set up all the computed attribute, kind of create like full name. If somebody's trying to read full name, and eventually they'll try to read it from computed attrs, then we'll actually build the actual computed attr, like dynamically on the fly as it's needed. We need to do the same thing for like the warehouse of where all data really is. So same kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Would there be a way? I'm just thinking of a couple of things.
Like CID needs to be added to this as well, and pretty much everything in the initialization step, or in the setups initialization step, which has a bunch of things as well.
What happens? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. We just need to kind of do this stuff.
Well, it makes it
a little trickier.
Into a can map. It'd be nice if there was a way.
What?
That should be nice if there was a way to do this without turning it into a can map.
What do you mean?
Well, like if there was, you're copying every can map prototype method, or onto the object, which basically turns that constructor into, it's like you mix in a can map on top of it.
Yeah. No, I could cut out. Well, the good thing. Okay, so can map has a lot of very useful functionality and mixinability, right? Because the define plugin kind of inserts itself, if you will, and type converters and things like that. It has a lot of hooks. So really what we need are the hooks present. Now, probably a better long-term way is actually to make this data object here where the real kind of can map-ish thing exists. So essentially, I want it to be small. Like one way we could just copy all of this code and recreate it, but that seems silly to me, right? If we want something that can be used and as bugs get fixed in here or performance improvements, they automatically.
We could just copy the ones that you need, like the mixin of stuff.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to necessarily call it. We could just get and then call, because remember JavaScript is the only problem is then these things are going to be trying to call this dot whatever and not find it. Yeah. So that's the problem. So I was thinking what we do is essentially what we have is an internal map, if you will, and we just make get and set point at that instead of to itself.
Okay.
And it's almost like proxies then in some ways, where like you have this object that is really just a shell to have getters and setters to go, and that way it probably works better with proxy in the long run.
Yeah, I like that. So what happens right now if you pass it? Can you scroll up to the top? What if you passed it a map, like let's say I did can map extend and I passed that prototype into this? It's going to then copy all the map stuff that's already there.
Well, no, it's just going to copy. It's going to copy can map stuff onto that, which would probably end up doing nothing. I mean, it wouldn't break anything because any additional extensions that you added would already be there. I mean, it's not. This is not for people to be doing that with, right?
Okay.
The idea is it's for normal constructor functions, I think.
Okay.
But this is pretty cool. I mean, this is way better.
Oh yeah, I like this a lot. I want to use it already.
Than can map, yeah. And it should be inheritable. The only problem is you have to call define. Like the one thing is like I'm trying to think how could we make this work with inheritance, and there's not really a great way of doing that with like the class keyword in JavaScript. Because you really need this method to run to say, hey, go create all these getter setters. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean we could make it so at the end, like, well, if you had a defined property with these kind of things inside of it, and you ran just called define on some object without the second thing, it was going to look on this object for a define and then set things up, the kind of way like how can map works right now. I don't know. There's a
I see what you mean.
There's a lot of thinking that needs to go into this, but yeah, it's just nice. I mean, it's to me it's very cool to be able to just do this.
So you can bind the full name as well. Yeah, it looks like you are.
Yeah, you can bind the full name, and you can read full name.
Yeah.
Too.
As a property.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, yeah. The future is here.
Awesome.
In 60 lines of code.
Yeah, that's the nice part.
So yeah, that's what Mohammed and I worked on, or Seraph and I worked on. Okay, Matthew, you're next.
Sure. Let me share my screen. I almost got through the guide I'm working on. I've been working on DoneJS 06. And there's been several bugs, but I've fixed all of them. This is the last one, which I have a pull request for, I think, or I will soon have a pull request. But what this does is, so the problem is that when you have the entire app completely built, you have Socket.io, and you go directly to the chat page, it doesn't finish loading. The can wait stuff doesn't work, and the reason why is Socket.io has code like this, which creates a timeout. So every time set timeout is called, we basically, well, not basically, we do increment count. So that's how we keep count of how many stuff has run. So what they do is they do a set timeout like far into the future, and then they clear it. And we haven't been handling cleared timeouts. So that wait that's created, the counter is never decremented. So I have a pull request which decrements the count whenever clear timeout is called.
Well, hopefully it's not that simple.
It's not that simple. No, it keeps track of timeouts.
The IDs? And
yeah, it keeps.
See, you match the ID with the. Now, could that create a memory leak?
No. Well,
you could have millions of.
I'm always removing the IDs. So at my test, I'm testing that there's 0 IDs. That's why I was asking about the looping question.
Okay.
But yes, and the other reason is that this all happens in like an object that gets like a constructor function that gets created. So that constructor function is gone. It's not a global. We're not keeping these IDs in a global object, so there wouldn't be a memory leak anyways.
Really? How do you? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, each time you call wait, you can wait's code. Each time you call this, or each time you call this function, it creates like a new request object. It creates like it has its own internal object it creates that has all this stuff.
Okay.
So I'm fixing this. I think this should fix the issue.
Oh, it won't. It won't if it's ever egg clearing. So that map gets cleared when that kind of realm gets cleared or whatever. But if you had something that was just kept calling set time out, and the realm never got cleared, that object would presumably get bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
which is fine, just a key, but that's not a big. Yeah, that's fine. The whole idea of this is that eventually your wait should end. Yeah, so that's not so big of a deal. Okay, cool, awesome. So, what do you think the timeline is for 06?
So my goal is, if this fixed, I'm gonna have to go through the guide again. That's fine. I'm pretty confident that this is all of the only thing. I'm pretty confident this is the last issue on the Mac, assuming hopefully there's not any Windows specific issues. I think I could have it out tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
Should we like a weekend, or should we wait?
No, nobody's going to be doing anything. This is the best time in the world to push something out.
Okay, well, hopefully tomorrow I can do it then.
If there's a bug, it'll be like one person in the world who...
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about was just my... the article. I'll just go through... It's not complete yet and very rough, but let me just talk through what I'm talking about and kind of my outline as it stands. I'll actually show the article a little bit. Can you see my screen all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically in order, I'm trying to, all right, so what I think, I really think 2.3 is the expressive power of CanJS. There's just a lot of things that you can articulate now that you couldn't do before, and I try to walk people through what I think are the most appropriate building blocks to kind of show how, the whole idea of, which React really gets well kind of made famous, is the idea that you can take your source state and drive everything the rest of your application from that. Sometimes they do it with events, but a lot of times they do it with source state. We've been able to do that for a long time, but we haven't been able to, I think, make it as fast as it should.
What do you mean by source state?
What I mean is, like, you have your application view model, and everything kind of flows from that, your core properties, right? Okay. Yeah. So it's like I kind of have a very to-do MVC example here, which is the to-dos to be displayed are determined from the to-dos loaded from the server and from whatever the filter property is on your CAN route. Right? Like that determines what you're showing. So I essentially want to say is, like, we're now, 2.3 is a lot about solving the challenges of that approach. So on a high level, the things that I'm going to talk about in order are, I'm switching these two, the order of these two, but each diffing, call expressions, the new binding syntaxes, the new key operators, and then finally the performance improvements. And probably I'll even hit about a little bit about just like how computes have changed their logic. Maybe, probably not actually. I'm just going to talk about performance improvements. So for each diffing, I kind of talk about how I want to talk a little bit about how that pattern has been a really good thing. It's something that we've tried to support pretty good since like even when we added computes, and then the define plugin took it to another level. But the problem was a lot of performance. And I talk about how diffing, if you have code like this, in 2.2, it would replace every single item when the source list changed. But now it's going to do a diff and only update like the one LI that needs to change. And I'll have a demo of like 100 or 200 to-dos in to-do MVC and just have people like add a to-do and see the performance difference between these.
Yeah, that's cool.
So the next thing I'm going to talk about is call expressions, and I'm going to try to explain how these help the how they make that this kind of stuff easier, and other things that they do well. So the big reasons call expressions exist is, one, they pass values instead of computes, which is really nice. They can be nested, and they can they have more. Obviously, this is not written right yet. They have more easily understood scope lookup rules. So I just have an example of, like, hey, you used to call with parentheses here when you wanted to call the pluralize helper. Well, you don't have to do that if you're using call expressions, right? That's nice. Next thing is they can be nested, so you can do this kind of like, hey, if I wanted to pluralize something and then capitalize it, I can do that. And especially how each combined with these kind of methods that return a list is really powerful, and I want to have like a nice example there showing that. Scope lookup rules are much more sane. I'm probably going to end with this one and go from past values to scope lookup rules and end with nested call expressions, because I think this is the actual most important one. But scope lookup rules are much more sane with call expressions, because previous logic was it would call the, well, for helper expressions, when they're looking up a method to call, they'll see if it's in the current context. If it's not in the current context, then they'll look at the helper scope, and if it's not there, they'll look up in the normal scope. Which this can make things confusing, because in this example, I have a pluralize in my data that returns people, but this is going to hit the pluralize here. It's going to hit the registered helper pluralize, even though there's a pluralize in our scope. That's not what happens with call expressions. When you use a call expression, it'll first find data. It'll first find a method in your scope, and only if it can't find it, look to your helper, which is nice. So yeah, it just cleans things up really good. And then the big reason, and then I'll get into the how using it with each is actually really powerful. Then the next thing I'm going to talk about are the binding syntaxes. It took me 30 minutes just to be able to get this level of formatting working, right, is with tables. But I'm going to go through all the different binding syntaxes, explain how they work. And then I'm going to go through, the key operators, talk about, and also including the references scope. So I'll talk about how at and the compute operator work, and then how the references scope works. And then I'm going to show the performance benefits spinning circles between 2, 3, and 2, 2. And then I'm also going to end with kind of just pointing people towards our discussion about 3.0, and also how our release schedule is going to be like, if something passes tests, we're just going to push it. But until there's like a release article, once there's release articles, that's when things should be considered really stable enough to upgrade to. And just kind of explain that process. We're not going to be doing betas forever. We'll be just making it 2.3.0 like we did because it passes all of our tests. But a release article will come once we think everything is like very stable and good time to upgrade.
So Justin, I have a question here. So the 2.3's API documents are already available, right? So
Yes.
is this supposed to be a user guide or something?
A what? Or something?
Is this supposed to be a user guide for 2.3 release?
A user what? I didn't hear the word after user.
A user guide?
Yes, it talks about the differences. Yes.
Okay.
So there's a couple things. I was trying to look through the issue list, 2.3. A couple things you didn't talk about. Like you didn't talk about like the route helper.
Yeah, that was in my outline, but it just
didn't talk about can import tag.
Well, that was in 2.2.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
Well, it's much different now. It was in 2.2, yeah, you're right. But it's well, okay.
That's why I didn't. Yeah, and I had these things, but like I just felt like it wasn't. Yeah, I probably should include the route URL. Actually, I was planning on doing that with talking about call expressions. I should probably keep that back. Yeah, I had it in my outline. I don't know. I felt like there's gonna be enough as there is, but yeah, that one's probably still worth it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of news. There's like the switch helper.
Yeah, that's why I have that here too. I don't know. That's just.
Well, it's the only thing is it's heavily focused on like. The article is heavily focused on improvements to stuff, but there's also new stuff too. I wonder if people are going to read this and be like, oh, well, none of this is really. I mean, call expressions, yes. I mean, there definitely is new stuff here.
And the binding syntaxes.
Binding syntaxes.
And,
for sure.
And the key operators. I don't know. I try to focus on the stuff that I felt like is the most complex, right? That you really need I felt like switch in case and register simple helper route URL. Just one of those things that you can. I can have an addendum like other quick like little changes and just throw those all in together because to me these things are not worth like an explanation, right? It's a 5-second thing to understand that, oh, there's a switch in case helper if you want it. Great.
Yeah, maybe not worth an explanation, but people like to hear about that, I think.
Yeah, I can have
more than they care to hear about like the how scoping works.
I disagree. Like
really?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean.
What people like to hear, I'm not.
Well, like to hear or need to hear maybe are different things.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe they like to hear about that stuff, but need to hear and need to have a good explanation. I think, like understanding how call expressions really work and the differences between
what
you're used to is like I don't know. That's an important thing.
But should it be in the article? I mean, you could put that in documentation and link to it from the article.
It is in the docs, but...
With the examples and everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's similar examples in the docs. Um, yeah, I mean, this isn't. I mean, it's like what is the purpose of this? To me, it's like to get at the root of the most important things, so that you know how to transition. It's not a change log, but it's like here's what you really need to know if you're moving to 2.3. These are the things that I think you really need to know, like the big game-changing features and functionality.
The only other thing is you said that
Like to me, call expressions change how you write an application. They can. Like call expressions combined with the diffing are the two biggest things to me.
Yeah. Well,
in apps that I've written. Huh? The binding syntax too, sure. Yeah, number 3. Those are the big 3. And sure, I mean I can have an addendum at the end, but those are the big things that I want to explain because they actually, you can do a lot of restructuring with your app if you know how these things work really well.
You said that we were gonna not. I mean, I agree that not waiting on releases is good, but I think in this case we absolutely made the right decision to do it the way we did it. Just because we redid the binding syntaxes twice during our pre-release phase.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why. Because we don't want to. I don't want to. The way I look at it is, releases are going to come when APIs are complete, right? And tests are passing, and that does not.
Go ahead.
That way we can close our discussion on APIs, which will go on forever, which was going on forever. And that's why we did it this way.
But I think it was a good thing that what we came up with is better than our first go at it.
No, I agree, and we will have those discussions. But even after we did that, there were still people like, "Hey, I want to vote." Like, "Hey, I think we should try this. We should try this. We should try this." You might not have seen that, but I was still getting after we kind of made the decision, a lot of people still saying "Oh, I don't like this. Let's do it a different way."
Okay. Maybe I interpreted what you were saying was, when we merge something in, we're just going to go ahead and do a release, which I don't think would not have been the correct thing to do, which would have meant we would have had the first binding syntaxes would have been 2.3. That would not have been good.
No. What I mean is when the API is settled. So
Okay.
It's API is settled, all tests are passing.
So we can still do pre-releases when we're unsure about an API.
Exactly. And in some ways what we could think is in some ways all these 2.3s prior to 2.3.8 in a lot of ways have been betas. API is finalized, but API is finalized, but maybe things aren't working perfectly. To me, there's really no reason to call it betas then. By Semver, Semver is all about APIs. Might as well, if we're saying these are the APIs we're sticking with, might as well call it 2.3.0. And because in reality, the reason why I look at it this way is you're never, ever have a framework perfectly working. Right? We still find bugs occasionally in stuff that's been around for 7 years, code that's been around for 7 years. And so it's an impossible thing to really say, hey, this is working 100%. So we will put out our best, hey, we really think now 2.3 with 2.3.8 has the majority of problems that you're going to find. It's probably got them solved. So you should be able to upgrade no problem.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with as far as bug fixes. That's why you have patches. You fix all bugs.
Yeah.
Definitely okay with that. I'm just not worried, but I don't want to. I don't want to commit to an API that's not ready, and you release it, and now you have to support it until the next major.
Yeah, but we can get majors out faster too in the future.
Hopefully. All right. Well, talk about this enough, probably.
Cool. All right, that's.
The only other thing, one more thing. I have one more, just a suggestion. A couple of weeks ago, maybe longer than that, we went over like the new how computes work, like how they would get put into queues and all that cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was like very informative on the level of a lot of what you're writing here. It would be cool, like maybe do a public. I don't think we did that as a public video, did we?
I don't know.
Something where we explain that. I think would be very nice to have.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about making that part of this last
document,
one, but I decided against it because it's not. Computes should have worked this way from the beginning.
Well, it'd be good to have as doc, because I guess what I'm thinking about is when we go 3.0, if Can Compute is a separate project, I think that'd be good documentation for that, with like some charts.
Maybe. I don't think it is for most. I think it's interesting for most people. I don't think it's useful to most people.
I have to think about that.
I think it's an interesting article, so people are like, I think people like reading, like, hey, how does this work, right? I think those kind of articles or videos are very fascinating to people, but I don't think in terms of like, are they going to program differently because they know how computes work, like
sure.
in that detail? I don't think so, and that's why I didn't include it in this.
That's
but
what it should have always worked, yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a very interesting article that people can read and be like, oh, this is cool how it works.
But maybe a video is enough where you would just like how you did before where you explained it.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Cool. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, hey, good seeing you. Have a happy New Year.
Yep.
And Prashant, look forward to talking to you Monday, and see you guys next week.
Yeah, happy New Year to you. Bye.
All right, later.